I saw that you had posted something on Instagram saying that you had gone through the judicial system and managed to get custody of your kids. And basically it sounded like you won whatever it was that happened, if that term even exists in the legal system. So I wanted to ask you a little more about your story. So I'm here today, everybody who's listening, with someone named SB, and I wanted to talk to her about everything that she's gone through. And so tell me from the beginning, like, how did you know that this was going to be a conflict, or were you blindsided with your ex, with going to court and dealing with all this custody stuff?
So I was a little bit blindsided because when I left my ex, it had taken me some time to even admit that, hey, I'm making an abusive relationship. And then so when I left, I still had this idea that like there were certain boundaries he wouldn't cross. So I left, and of course I expected to take my children with me. I made the mistake also of like letting him know up front that I was leaving, which I would never suggest a victim announces. So that really put me at a disadvantage. So I eventually left, and we have 2 children. And basically he would not let me have our oldest, but I had our youngest. Yes, he just felt, I guess, now he says that he felt that like he was losing everything and I had to lose something. So yeah, that was his mindset. So I had moved I literally moved across the bridge to another state. So I was only like 45 minutes away. And I realized he just was not going to let me, like, he wouldn't even let me see my son without him being around. And I had spoken to a lawyer, so I knew that I could legally just take my son whenever I wanted, but I was like scared.
And you didn't have any agreement, any legal anything?
We had
right?
Nothing. We were still married and we had nothing. I just decided that I was leaving.
Okay. And then mind if I ask, how old were the kids? Were they older, little?
My son was 5. And my daughter was like barely just turned 1.
So really little.
So she wasn't even 1 yet. So she was almost 1. So they were pretty young, but my son is old enough to remember some things. He was like, old enough to remember mommy and daddy together. My daughter does not. So they have a very different experience. So I ended up filing. I was actually the person that filed for custody. And I thought that, I tried to do it myself. I didn't try to use a lawyer at first or anything like that. It was a disaster.
Let me pause for 1 second. So you didn't file for divorce yet. You just filed for custody?
We did our divorce separately. You know what? We did our divorce on our own.
Oh, really?
That's another thing. Yeah. So we did our divorce on our own. I feel like, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit blurry then, because I would have to look at the dates on like everything. I believe we were not divorced yet. I don't believe we were divorced.
So I just want to clarify. So you went for custody first and then the divorce.
We filed our own divorce papers ourselves. And so it was something completely separate. So it was like almost over by the time I actually filed for custody.
Oh, okay.
So when I say it was such a mess, because I had no clue, like I'm just out of like this relationship, have no clue how to use the judicial system. I have no money because he made all the money. So I'm just like flailing out here trying to, do whatever I could. I had just started a new job that I almost lost because of court cases and stuff. And just, performance, because I was so stressed out. I was jumpy. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But honestly, when we went to our first hearing, the lawyer that I had managed to use every penny from my new job to get did not show up to court. So it was just me. And they basically would not listen to me. They did not care. Like when I tried to explain why my son needed to be with me, I was cut off and they would not let me talk for like the whole time. And then they gave my ex like temporary custody.
So now did he have an attorney there?
He did, and a good one. So it was me. And basically, it was almost like the attorney and the judge were having a conversation. And then they tried to make it like I was mentally unstable. Like I tried to say, like, listen, like he's suicidal. Like I was trying to explain all these things. And they basically turned around on me. And they were saying that I was the one that was unstable. They couldn't take my daughter because luckily she was not in their jurisdiction.
Wow.
So yeah, so then I had to like fight just for days to see my son. They were trying to make it that I only got to see him every other weekend.
Uh-huh.
It didn't matter that I was the main caregiver for the majority of his life. It was absolutely a mess.
This is what you're saying is resonating so much with this workshop that I just took yesterday on how I mean, I'm assuming that your ex-husband didn't use the term alienation, but how every time that I don't know if you even brought up anything with domestic abuse or domestic violence, but you mentioned that you said that he was suicidal, but how so often in court it's turned so that the woman looks like she's mentally unstable, you know, and that she's treated not just with skepticism, but with hostility. And it sounds exactly like your experience.
It was a lot of hostility. And it was like, it was almost like I was getting, like, to me, it felt like I was getting like looks of disgust because the reason I left was because of like the last attack that he did on me was really, really bad. So by the time I get into court, it's like probably 8 months later. And I'm telling them about this moment that happened and they just cut me off. They were not interested in listening to anything. She was like, did you file a police report? And I was like, no. And I never got to say another word. Like, you know, he always threatened me. He threatened to kill himself if I did anything. He threatened our kids. Like they did not care about that. They literally just cut me off and turned it all on me. And all of a sudden I was like this terrible, terrible person.
This happens all the time. It's giving me chills to hear it, you know, right now from you. This happens constantly.
Yeah, it was a mess. And like his lawyer was so disrespectful to me. Like he literally told me at one point to like sit down and be quiet. Like it was like the worst experience. And it was then that I realized, like, because I didn't really know much about domestic violence or how it worked. I had this altruistic view where I'm like, of course they're going to help me because they're going to want to protect my kids and this, that, and the other. And
right. That's when I realized. Justice system, right? You're going for justice.
Exactly. And that was when I realized, I was like, wait a second, this is not at all like what I thought it was going to be. And I realized, I was like, there's literally no one. Like I don't have anyone to help me. And not to mention in the past, I had tried to make, even after this, I tried to make reports of different things. And like the police would just be like, well, if you're not going to press charges, there's no point in filing a report. I have been talked out of so many times. It is insane.
How long were you with your partner?
We got married in 2014. Mm-hmm. Our divorce was actually final in 2017, but I left at like the beginning of 17, January 2017.
Wow.
I was done. So that was like really dramatic. And then when, you know, I went to my lawyer and I was like, you know, you weren't there. And she basically, what she ended up doing though was, and I do feel like, and I think this is important, that if you're going to use a lawyer, you want to try to find someone that understands domestic violence. I really don't think that she understood or took it that seriously, or more that she wasn't optimistic because she knew the system. Like she knew that they weren't really going to care. Mm-hmm. And she was like, you need to take a different approach to this.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So,
okay, so what happened?
So basically what happened was she kept pushing the date out. Honestly, like I feel like this was her tactic. She kept pushing the date out and continuances. And eventually my ex could not afford to retain his lawyer anymore. So he ended up dropping it. So it was just going to be me and him up in court.
Wait a second. So in the interim, what was happening with your son, your older child that he had
I'm still trying to see him. I'm still missing work just to be able to pick him up to make sure. Yeah. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So a lot of craziness is going on. A lot of craziness.
I can imagine.
And actually, he ended up hitting me with a door at one point because, see, it's just like, if I knew then what I know now, I should have been
say that?
right. Like just keep your distance from him, just stay away from him, whatever. But because he had my son, I'm still going to his house. He was living with his parents. I'm I'm still going to his parents' house, to see my son. And, he got angry at one point. So he slams me with the door and I reported that. And they gave me a temporary restraining order. Great. I ended up dropping it because my lawyer was like, listen, you have a restraining order, but you're in the middle of a custody case and he has your son. So it was kind of like,
yeah, which one are you gonna, yeah.
Right. She was like, I'm just saying, she was like, it's going to make it harder for you, because this was in a different state. So my temporary restraining order is in Jersey. The temporary custody is in Pennsylvania. So that was the problem. So I was just like, I'm just going to drop this. So basically my ex runs out of money. He ends up dropping his lawyer. He does not want to go against me in court alone. And because by the time, mind you, months have gone by.
I was going to say, about how much time since this started, and also how, the continuances, which if anyone doesn't understand, it means the delays.
I filed in about maybe September of 2017. Maybe it might have been August. We didn't drop it until like the following summer.
So almost a year.
Yeah. So it was almost a year that this was dragging on. And my ex eventually is just running out of money. So he drops his lawyer. He did not want to go up against me in court alone. And by this time, I'm also going to therapy and I have a support group from domestic violence. I've learned so much. So this whole year, this is like, I'm doing what I can. I'm getting my son into therapy, me into therapy, my daughter into therapy. We're learning about domestic violence. We go through an education process. So now I'm feeling a lot better because I'm like, all of a sudden I'm starting to learn stuff. I'm also learning from other victims how the court system works and all of this stuff. And how it's like, your abuser, his weak spots, you know how to, you always knew, you just didn't know you knew because you were distracted with everything, that he was doing to you. So
survival, you probably were in survival mode in a lot of ways.
Exactly. So I'm still in survival mode, but it's not as dire. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I actually ended up, we actually ended up dropping the court case in court, really just because he didn't have any money. And I all of a sudden become the co-parent that really just wants to get along. And, I don't really care about the past. And, I just kind of went that route. And then I don't know that I would really suggest this for others, but he always needed to, like, he was always responsive to me needing him or like just not being quite sure about life without you, so really just upping that dramatics. And I got everything I wanted from him basically.
Well, I think everybody has their own, they know their abuser's weakness. And so you have effectively, it sounds like, used his weakness to manipulate him. Basically. And if he is at all, toxic, narcissistic type, so much is about their ego and what they need. And it sounds like you figured that out and you're able to feed his ego on whatever level just to make him feel like he's important.
Exactly. Like, I will always need you, whatever.
Yeah.
So it worked, but the only downside that I have been thinking about is, like, I don't necessarily fear for my children's safety because he doesn't live alone. He lives with his parents. There's going to be a time when he doesn't live alone. And that's going to be a different fight because I am going to worry. You know, like right now they're not usually alone. They're not by themselves. So
Mhm.
it's still a concern, but I won't necessarily be able to control that. And of course, if I tried to go to court, they're going to be like, well, you let him have him all this time. And that's when it becomes more of a like, well, you can't do anything till he does something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like the downside of not, I don't know, holding that, like he's an abuser.
Right.
But I mean,
But you've
I feel like
learned,
there's always going to be some loss
right?
going.
I mean, it's almost like you've learned the lesson that the legal system isn't going to help you in a
Right.
lot of ways. So, like many people that I know also, they've decided to just stay out of it, and if you have been able to figure out how to well, I wouldn't call it justice, but to manage, without the courts, and it's acceptable for the moment, because things always change and your kids are really young, then that's great that you're able to do it. But it sounds like it's amazing that you got the help and the support. How did they I'm thinking of my own experience, which was long after getting out of my relationship, but how did you end up connecting with domestic violence services?
So actually, it was when I reported when I reported him for the first time, right after it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So here in Jersey, when that happens, they automatically connect you with Catholic Charities, I believe it
Mm-hmm.
is. So, and at first I was just like, no, I'm not doing this. But
Uh-huh.
like when I tell you, it is the best decision I have ever made in my life for me and my kids. Like it seriously set me on a path of healing and clarity, and just it, like they were like the best. They were absolutely awesome. Um,
Yeah,
because
I had
my
the same.
son actually was very depressed. He was very depressed, and it was like
Uh-huh.
so heartbreaking. And he missed me, of course,
Yeah.
and he didn't understand what was going on. Like he didn't get it. He's 10 now, and he's just like typical 10-year-old.
Mhm.
So I mean, it works, and we also have like a safety plan. So that's something that kind of makes me feel better. We have like a code to text each other. I'm like, remember, if you see if anything's going on and you need my help. I don't really make it so much about his dad as much as if you are scared
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not around, you text me this code so I know that something's up.
So smart. We
So,
did
and
a
that's
whole
something we
workshop on
learned.
safety planning. It's like you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do with that. That's great.
Yeah. So that way I don't have to, I mean, you know, at the time, whenever they wanted to know what was going on, I just kind of put it to like, kids learn about bullying in school. I just
Mm-hmm.
left it at, daddy was, being a bully, and, it just didn't work out. We're better now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if someone's bullying you, you speak up and you just take some distance. And that's really what we left it at. And, now what, almost 5 years later, they think that we're friends, you know, and,
Good.
everything is pretty calm. And it's mostly, if I start getting a sense of, like some anger or whatever, we cut it. That's it. That's, it's over. So,
Yeah, so it's like you've learned like how to establish those boundaries, and you've made it so that your kids don't have to worry about your safety or whatever is happening between you.
exactly. Yep. That's
It sounds
exactly.
like pretty ideal for a terrible situation, you know?
It is. And I have been a little bit reluctant or worried just about sharing my story because I honestly do not believe that my ex is a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
He struggles with mental health issues that
Mm-hmm.
are not being cared for.
Mm-hmm.
He's not taking care of them. So it's not something that just popped up out of nowhere. Like he's dealt
Yeah.
with them from childhood, but back then it was so taboo. So, and I kind of watched him, I don't know, I want to kind of like break down over years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that he is an evil person, but I never want to tell someone else to be just looking for the good in their abuser, because even mental illness is not an excuse. Like,
Right. I mean,
I still could have died. Like I was still
yeah.
brutally attacked multiple times. I still have injuries from this and brain damage. So like there's no excuse. So I try to be really careful. So it's like, yes, I have like a pretty calm co-parenting relationship now. But it's also been like 5 years, and you know,
Yeah. And the thing, I like that you mentioned that about the labels, like maybe he's in, he's probably not a narcissist, maybe he has mental health problems. A lot of people will say, well, how do I know if this person's a narcissist in terms of our and
it doesn't matter. Just
like with Chris and I with Been There Got Out, we just say we're focused on not what they are, but you taking care of yourself and protecting yourself and your children. So it doesn't matter. You
exactly.
Don't need to
it doesn't. Yes. And I just want to say, like, I chose this way, but I also made sure that I was safe first. That was and like, we didn't even get here until like a few years ago, because I was so focused on safety and healing and like my children being safe. So
as you should be. It's like, what do I think that Abraham Maslow's pyramid of is it needs? Like, you have to take care of safety and security first, before you can get to self-actualization. So yeah, that's great. Well, it sounds like you're managing really well. Do you want to talk about your project that you're doing?
Yeah. So I call it creatively_SB Fields on IG. Mm-hmm. I'm basically just sharing my journey of healing. I talk a little bit like about the past, about like the process that it took, because I just gave you like a short synopsis, but I'm just going to say I was a total mess. I was a wreck. I was all over the place. It was horrible. But, some years later, after a lot of therapy and help and healing, like, I'm a lot better. But the one thing that I wasn't doing was taking care of myself physically. Mm-hmm. Survival mode, just trying to make sure everyone else is okay. It was never really about me. So now I'm really trying to focus now on like, getting into physical therapy, trying to heal injuries, trying to, just doing that so that I can actually get active, so that I can exercise, making sure I'm being mindful of eating well, getting sleep, getting rest, mm-hmm. just a lot of stuff like that, because it also helps be a better mom. Like I think a lot of us as parents kind of just like, our kids. They need us. But it's like, they need you at the best that you can be. So like, if you're taking care of you and they can see you being mindful and, practicing healing techniques, and like, I incorporate my kids in this now. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's kind of given us like a good, I don't know, a strengthening bond, if that makes sense. So like at night,
role model, so you've developed resilience and strength, and they can see that.
Yes, I'm hoping so. Yeah. And so like every night we do like a cup of tea, like we have like a cup of calming herbal tea, and we just kind of go over the day and chit chat and stuff. Cause that's the longest I can get my 10-year-old to talk. Like, otherwise he's just like, it's legal. Why are you talking to me? He doesn't say it, but there's just the expression. I'm like, okay, never mind. But when I sit him down and with my daughter and I sit them down, they will seriously just chat away. And I'm just like, oh, my son is talking. My daughter's always talking, but like my son, it's big. So, it's just like the little things. And of course, keeping up that message of, I've been there. I'm trying to tell you, like, if you're wondering if it's worth it, can you do it? I'm not going to pretend, and I do try to be honest. Like, it's not easy. It is not easy, but I can promise it's better than what you're in.